What else? It's not a lot of news. A lot of news. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. WABC Ron supports Zimmerman. Ron, you have your moment in the sun. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Michael. With the Zimmerman-Martin case, where there isn't direct evidence, and what little direct evidence there is, does tend to favor Zimmerman. Where there isn't, geometric logic tends to favor Zimmerman. Some of the things you said, maybe he had the gun out when he confronted Martin. If that was so, it was unlikely that there would have been a tussle with Martin. I don't think a person, especially a 17-year-old, would have been willing to tangle with somebody who has a gun brandished at him. Second...
Well, let's pause. That's a very good point, but I'm not sure I agree with it. Let's reverse it for a minute. Let's assume Zimmerman was walking around with his gun in his hand, and Trayvon eluded him and saw this jerk with a gun and jumped him from behind, as he claims. In other words, Zimmerman claims Trayvon jumped him from behind. Let's assume that that's true. Do we know if Zimmerman already had the gun in his hand? We don't. So it could be, both things could be true at the same time, Ron. You'd have to agree.
Need to assume that because the coroner's office, and I know this from being in law enforcement, the geometry of the shot fit Zimmerman's version of events. Meaning the angle at which...
What do you mean by the geometry of the shot?
The angle at which the round entered Martin's body fit Zimmerman's version of events, with him saying he was on the ground and he fired straight up with Martin over him.
Okay, you're in law enforcement. Are you a policeman?
I'm retired from law enforcement, yes.
Okay, then let me ask you something.
Career history in background in law.
Then let me ask you this, if I may. If you had engaged in a similar situation and shot an unarmed 17-year-old black kid, tell me what would have happened to you.
Well, of course, there would be the fact-finding. There would be the grand jury. Given the facts, let's say that he's trying to crack my skull on the floor. More than likely, almost overwhelmingly, the grand jury probably would refuse to indict because the use of force that escalated very rapidly, because it only takes a fraction of a second for physical force to become lethal force, that quick in a tussle. And so the use of force in that situation would justify the use of my sidearm.
Would you agree with me that as a neighborhood watchman, he didn't have the same standards for use of force that a policeman would?
Oh, no. I disagree with you there because basically the use of force is the use of force for a police officer or a citizen. You don't... Okay,
then let's go to the next level. Do you agree with me that he should have carried pepper spray and perhaps had that at the ready instead of a loaded 9mm gun?
Yeah, but that's not germane to the whole case. The issue is that he didn't have that. Force was brought against him.
Well, wait, why didn't he have it? He was only a neighborhood watchman. Who told him to run around with a loaded gun?
Well, even though it was not the policy of his neighborhood watch guard to do that, he was within his legal rights in the state of Florida to do that.
Whoa, this is very interesting. You just said something I hadn't yet heard. That was not the policy of the neighborhood watch to carry a loaded gun?
Yes. But, however...
No, wait, this is intriguing. So they didn't tell him to carry a loaded gun. They didn't instruct him to carry a loaded gun in looking for people. They did not tell him to do that. He did it on his own?
Yes, there was no set policy one way or the other, prohibiting or encouraging.
Okay, no, I'm just listening. I'm listening and learning. Why did he not have pepper spray or a secondary weapon instead of a gun?
Well, I would say there's two reasons for that. First, one, of course, Mrs. Zimmerman would have to answer that most accurately. Secondly, that neighborhood watch, in my opinion, did fail probably to properly equip their members. They did train them. They gave them the required legal minimum training, but it appears as they didn't supply much in the way of equipment.
Mm-hmm. But why did Zimmerman not follow the 9/11 operator's suggestion? You don't have to do that, sir, to follow this kid.
The 9/11 operator was a civilian without any authority to order him not to follow him. It was merely a suggestion.
But wait, so, okay, this is the crux of the matter from my point of view. Why did Zimmerman follow him?
Well, Zimmerman may have been observing him. It was said that Trayvon Martin fit the description of a person who was wanted for burglaries in that project several weeks earlier. And that he
would that justify killing him?
That was not the reason for killing him. The justification for killing him is because he was using force by smashing his head against a concrete brick.
Well, that brings us to the crux of the matter. Why was he in that situation, Zimmerman, that he was having his head bashed on the sidewalk. If that's the case, by the way, who put him in that situation?
He made a common law inquiry, which is completely legal.
No, he made that decision to be there. Zimmerman put himself in harm's way.
No.
And then yes, he did. He had no right. He had no necessary right to be there. He didn't have. He could have. Ron, he could have stayed in his car. Ron, he could have stayed in his car.
Okay, it was maybe a judgment of error, but not a criminal culpable judgment of error. There's two different...
Well, hold on. It may have been a judgment of error, but it led to the death of a 17-year-old who had committed no crime.
It led to the death of a 17-year-old who's responding to a simple question with force, trying to crack a guy's skull open.
Do we know that he was having a skull bashed in for a fact, or do we have to assume that that's true?
No, there are injuries to the back of his skull. That was established in the trial very clearly.
Yeah, you're right. But how serious were those injuries?
He didn't have to wait until they were elevated to the point that he was dead to react.
But you're not answering the question. You obviously heard the forensic pathologist who said that they were minor and they were treated by a Band-Aid, right?
The pathologist never examined Zimmerman. Never examined him. She went by looking at photos. Do you know how unprofessional it is? Mike, I've been in many criminal cases.
I think you're taking a very strong position, and I really respect that. But I think you just glossed over the fact that the pathologist said these were not life-threatening injuries to Zimmerman's skull.
Diagnosis without examining Mr. Zimmerman personally. You cannot make a diagnosis based on photographs.
Okay, but that's what you're doing.
Didn't make an issue of that. So
but that's what you're doing. You're making a diagnosis based on photographs, and you're saying he was near death.
I'm saying that his head was hit. His head was being struck, and he didn't have...
But she, based on the photographs that you're looking at, she assumed that they were minor. There were scrapes and a Band-Aid covered it. You're assuming that his life was in danger and he had a right to kill the kid.
One is banging your head. It does not take... I've had 2 homicides that I dealt with where similar situations, what seemed like light blows, killed 2 guys. Hello?
Why didn't he use a non-lethal weapon? Why did he have to kill him?
He did not have a non-lethal weapon available to him, and that begs the issue. That's not the issue. The issue is what was, what is, what did.
No, it doesn't beg the issue. This goes to it's very germane to me, Ron. For one reason, I think Zimmerman was a wannabe cop who was looking for trouble. He wanted to earn a merit badge with the police and the community, and he was trying to play John Wayne, and things got out of hand, and he shot the kid. Had he not had the gun ready to shoot, why did he have the safety off, Ron, as a cop, ex-cop? Why did he have the safety off?
Let's do that without calling the police.
What?
If he wanted to do that, why not just brandish the weapon?
Wait. No, let's go back to the fact that, okay, people have convinced me he had every right to have a round in the chamber, but why did he have the safety off?
Well, the particular model weapon he had, I believe, doesn't have the conventional slide or button safety. You know, today we're in a whole different array of technologies with guns. But even
no, it does have a safety because I've owned a smaller caliber weapon of the same manufacturer, and it does in fact have a safety.
Organizations and security organizations.
Well, you're going over the germane point here. Not only did he have a round in the chamber, meaning he pulled back the slide and loaded a round, he was ready for action, but he took the safety off. He pushed that handle.
Was killed. Could you answer that question?
I didn't hear it.
One more blow may not have done him in while he was fiddling with his safety.
Say that. Please say it again. Please say it again.
How do you know that if, let's say he did have the safety on, the difference between trying to fumble to get the safety on and off in a confrontation like that could have cost him just enough time for Trayvon Martin to hit him one more time and kill him? How do you know that wouldn't have been the case?
But here's my point, Ron. Had he had the safety locked on, and now remember, Zimmerman claims that Trayvon reached for his gun. Do we agree on that?
Yes, he claims that he reached down. Yes, he did.
Okay, so let's assume that he's telling the truth, and Trayvon reached for this gun. Had the safety been on instead of off, had the safety been locked on, and had Trayvon gotten the gun from him, what would have happened at that moment?
Well, here's the theories that we could come up with. A1, that Trayvon would have been able to deliver the lethal blow to him in that few seconds. 2.
No. If Trayvon had gotten the gun, what would Trayvon have done with that gun?
And secondly...
Wait, you're not listening. What if Trayvon had gotten the gun away from Zimmerman? What would Trayvon have been able to do with that gun in that instant if the safety was on?
he might have been able to take the safety off and shoot Zimmerman with his own gun.
He might have been, but he also might not have been able to shoot him in that instant. And that would have given Zimmerman the opportunity to wiggle out from under him and whack him in the head and or run away. So again, my main point is that Zimmerman put himself in harm's way. Zimmerman was looking for trouble. Zimmerman's gun was ready to go off, and go off it did. I keep repeating he did not want to kill this kid. I keep repeating he hoped to God he didn't have to. But the fact of the matter is he has culpability and liability, in my opinion.
Not criminal culpability. At best, possibly civil culpability in a civil tort. But I'm telling you, it's...
All right, that's fair. I will accept that in this discussion. But he has liability.
Two separate things, as you well know.
Well, I know that they overcharged him, and that's going to be a problem for the prosecution. They never should have brought murder against him. It should have been manslaughter from day one.
They injected another charge in the case near the end of the trial. No,
I know, child abuse, which is ludicrous.
Not just child abuse, even the manslaughter charge. In New York State, when you charge somebody, you have to include all the lesser included offenses up front before the trial commences. You don't wait until a ball game is...
Well, I agree that the prosecution has done a terrible job. I agree with you. Everyone's saying the same thing. We agree with that. Well, Ron, thanks for paying such close attention to the case and to the words that I have used on the show. And I know many of you agree with Ron. In fact, if I took a poll of my audience, I'd have to say it's 80-20 in favor of Zimmerman is innocent. It doesn't change my opinion at all. He's guilty of manslaughter for